Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to the WriteHive 2021 Horror Guest of Honor interview with Gabino Iglesias. It is my pleasure to introduce him, a man of many, many, many talents. He's a writer, an editor, a journalist, a teacher, a photographer, a book reviewer, and just an all-around amazing dude who lives in Austin, Texas. Gabino is the author of truly an insane amount of short fiction and 4 novels: Gutmouth from Eraserhead Press, Hungry Darkness from Severed Press, and Zero Saints and Coyote Songs from Broken River Books, which won the Wonderland Book Award and was nominated for the Bram, Stoker, and Locus Awards. His nonfiction has appeared in places like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Review of Books, the LA Times, El Nuevo Dia, and other venues. He is the book reviews editor at Pank Magazine, the TV film editor at Entropy Magazine, a columnist for Lit Reactor, and he publishes reviews in places like NPR, Volume 1 Brooklyn, Criminal Element, The Rumpus, and other print and online venues. He also teaches at SHNU's MFA program, and somehow he found time to be our horror guest of honor. Thank you so much for being here, Gabino.
No, thank you all for having me here. As you can see, it's not, that bio doesn't say anything about being guest of honor anywhere. So this is very exciting. This is a first. So I'm happy to be here and talking to all of you.
Thank you so much. Really my first question for you is just how? Like how?
It's very easy. It's you don't sleep at all, and then you keep some kind of lists of deadlines, and then you go about your daily life. And then when you see one of those deadlines approaching, you panic, you drop everything else, and then you just sit down and you do that one thing. My training is. My education is as a journalist, so you don't miss deadlines. So you panic, you skip showers and meals, and you get that one thing done, and then you can move on to the rest of it. So a lot of panicking mostly, and writing under pressure. I guess that's the easy recipe for it. That's how you do it.
I mean, it seems to be working out pretty well for you.
It's that Hunter S. Thompson line, like I'm not advocating for the use of drugs, but it works for me. It's like I'm not telling folks to do it that way, but it works for me. So if that's your style, if you're wired that way, then by all means use the panic method.
Absolutely, and I think that kind of leads in really well to this first question that I kind of want to ask, because all of these different roles that you play as an artist, as a teacher, and as a book reviewer as well, they all provide something very different to the culture, I suppose. And just as a human being, especially working with students and creating art for other people to consume, they're all different, but they're all essential. How do you manage all of those different things? Like you just said you have lists and things, but there's some things that you, like you said, with deadlines, things that you need to do versus things that you personally want to be. And how do you balance those two ideas?
The having a normal sort of quote unquote 9 to 5 was always a very good way of keeping things organized, because it was, this is what I need to do to enjoy the benefits of having health insurance or being able to afford to pay my rent. I was a high school teacher for 2 years, so I knew that at the top of that list was, you got to get up at 5 a.m. You got to be at school. You got to grade. You got to meet with students. You got to teach your 4 classes. And then after that, I had to teach my MFA courses. So that was a huge chunk of the day was just for teaching. And the little bit of time that you had left, you want to go to the gym. You want to watch a documentary sometime, but you also want to read, and you also want to review. You also want to write. I lost that high school job in June of 2020, and then I was very scared for a little bit, and then I realized that I had a lot of extra time. I had all of these other hours in the day that I could use for other things, and that's when I realized the whole thing that everybody in here has heard 20,000 times in their life, if you find something that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So in, June 1st, I was out of a job. June 2nd, I woke up and it was like, all right, so I have this 8 hours now. Let me do the thing that I love. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it to the end of the year, or I was going to end up doing something else, like, cashier or whatever, because it wasn't the best of times to look for a teaching gig.
Yeah.
And it's March, and I'm still not teaching or working anything else full time, because I've managed to find a way to survive doing exactly what I love to do. And it's been a blessing and a curse, but I'm focusing on the blessing part and enjoying the ride that way.
Well, this is a horror conversation, so let's talk about that curse a little bit. Let's talk
Yeah.
about kind of that feeling of like, now this thing that you love is your job full time. So you don't get to just do it in the hours where you get to do it and you get to savor that time. It's now the thing that you depend on. How has that shifted the way that you work?
It took me about two years probably to write 45,000 words of the next novel. And then between June and October, I wrote 50,000 words, and I edited that thing and sent it off to an editor. And by the end of November, we had the first set of revisions done. So I'm not angry. I'm not at that point in my career where it feels like a chore that I have to sit down and write. And it's the variety of places where that income is going to come from. It's like, am I going to be teaching a workshop? Am I grading MFA stuff? Am I going to write something for NPR? Am I pitching San Francisco Chronicle? So I'm never bored. And that kind of helps me. I don't feel like I have to do anything, because it's always, if I really don't want to do this today, there's something else on that list that requires attention. So I'll jump on that and I'll wait for my mood to come back. It's a beautiful thing when you think that if you're a writer or you try to make the whole writing thing full time, you're going to write every single day. That's not real. That's it. I don't know if that happens for any other people. Some of you old pros out there might beg to differ, but I can't do it. Some days you're just not in that mood. Maybe there's no electricity. Maybe you have some other things to do. Your Wi-Fi is dead, or you have a friend and you're helping them tackle a situation, and you never get around to sitting down and writing. So I'm not forcing myself right now to do absolutely anything except doing enough amount of work every single day to know that one or two or three of those things that I do will help me pay the bills at the end of the month. And the rest is just when it comes. When it comes, I'll do it. I'll tackle it. I'll feel the inspiration, and I'll write some horror.
That's really cool, because you're talking a lot about the different things that you do, all the diversity of incomes that you have. And with that, because they're all different kinds of things, there is fiction, there's nonfiction, there's, and you still teach at the university level, right? With the MFA program. So doing that as well, and also being an editor, you have all these different outlets that aren't just writing one novel after another. Are there things that you do, though, that aren't for public consumption? Are there things that you do just for yourself to kind of get away from the pressure of like, I have a deadline I have to meet for this, when you're feeling that kind of way about like, I need to do something else right now?
So I'm right now, my hope is to do the quote unquote traditional thing with the next novel, which is find a publisher that can give me a little bit of a boost, that can give me the one of those great quiet secrets about independent small publisher world is distribution sucks. Like, people will invite you places and then they'll say, you have to bring your own books, because there's no way for us to get, we don't know how many we're going to sell, just bring your own books. I want a bigger publisher that will give me that distribution. When that happens, my guess is those type of publishers usually offer some kind of advance. If that happens, then a lot of that pressure from the day-to-day will probably go away. or as many folks know, once you've been poor for a very long time, that poverty PTSD won't go anywhere. You just feel like you can sleep a little better, but you're gonna still hustle every day because you don't know how long that thing's gonna last. This means that when that happens, it might change. But for right now, because I decided to take that route, I finished that novel, like I said, in October. I knew that going indie could mean I'll send it to a publisher, and by middle of November, I would have a book in my hands. But I wanted a little bit more, so I think I'm giving myself the pleasure of doing things for myself. Like, this is the way that I want to do the next book, so I'm going to take my time and do it this way. A lot of people say, you review for so many venues, like, when do you read for pleasure? If I don't think I'm going to enjoy a book, I don't pitch it, right? And then sometimes I'll pitch it and nobody takes it, and then I'll still read it, and even if I don't review it for anywhere, it's something that I do for myself. And from time to time, I'll sit down and I'll write something for an anthology that's for charity. I'm not gonna get paid a single cent, and that's gonna make my day. It's just something that I'm gonna be into. I'm gonna work on it, and then I'll send it out and not get paid. But I did it because I wanted to do it, and that keeps me going. So I think I'll get a little bit of pleasure out of all those things that I'm doing, because if I start thinking there's no pleasure in any of this, then that's how it really starts feeling like work. And I've worked everywhere, man. I've worked construction. I've worked in the insurance business. Like, I don't, the little bits and pieces of my soul that survived working in an insurance office, working the phones, I don't want to damage them by forcing myself to do stuff that I don't love. So right now it's kind of that daily hustle to put a lot of work into the things that actually make me happy. So if I'm writing a story, if I'm working on another novel, if I'm pitching a review, if I'm writing nonfiction or a column or doing an interview for Southwest Review, whatever it is, it's because I want to do it, and it's a way to pay the bills that actually puts a smile on my face, which is something that the other jobs didn't do.
That's so lovely. That's really beautiful to hear. And I'm happy you've been able to get yourself to this point, even with with everything going on. You definitely deserve it, because there's also something about you, especially anyone who follows you on Twitter. And if you're not following him on Twitter, you really should be. Something that you really do is you are a very vocal advocate for reviewing books by marginalized authors, by trans authors, by authors of color. And what do you feel your responsibility is as a reviewer to kind of uplift those books? Because we know reviews are kind of one of those things that put books out into the world. How do you take that on and sift through all of the potential books you could review?
Right. There's this thing where a lot of people who don't know publishing tended to understand that everyone has the same probability of being reviewed. Like, everybody's going to get the same treatment. Like, my next book is going to be reviewed in the New York Times, or somebody like me will pitch it to NPR. It's not what happens. All right. That's not what happens. First of all, we're talking, I guess now it's Big Four, right? Not Big Five.
Yeah,
Big
technically.
Four. They have the power and the money and the time and the connections. So, for example, I know some stuff that I'll be reviewing in June and July and August of this year. Indie publishers don't have, there's big indies and smaller indies.
Yeah.
And those smaller indies don't have money to print out thousands of galleys and send them out. And they don't have a marketing and PR team. But those books are often not as good. They're often better than some of the stuff that's getting covered.
Yes, absolutely.
So it takes a lot of effort to not only have them land on your radar, but then to get somebody to let you review those books, because they deserve attention. And then there's also the fact that publishing is a very old business, and it wasn't very kind or very accepting of non-traditional authors. And by traditional, we mean white, male, and straight. I love me some white male straight authors, especially the living kind.
Yeah.
They're amazing. And some of my best friends, some of my publishers have been straight white men, but also I want to read stuff by trans writers. I want to read stuff by fellow Latinos and Latinx folks, and I want to read stuff from Black writers and Asian American writers and Native American writers. And if it's out there and it's an absolute gem, I have to get the word out. I have to use whatever little power I have to shine a light on them. And then on top of that, we have this thing where on any given year, on a good year, Latino and Black book reviewers, literary critics will make up anywhere between 4 and 7% of the reviewers' pool. So if I'm going to get this gig and I'm going to write for, San Francisco Chronicle and NPR and whoever else allows me to do this thing, if I get there as a brown man, am I going to review James Patterson? Is that like I fought to get there and now I'm going to cover, Michael Connolly because he doesn't really need my help.
Yeah.
He hasn't been shunned by publishers at any point in time. So let me find that poetry by, an LGBTQ writer from the border who has been struggling, or that guy who got his big break in publishing, but has been struggling for years, hearing no because we don't want to publish this type of thing, or whatever other reason. It just feels like if I'm covering those folks, I'm doing it wrong. So I'll just cover all the outsiders, or all my people.
It's just so amazing. And it's really lovely how to see, especially like within the indie space, because that's the majority of the people watching this are probably indie authors, just because that's what WriteHive does. And it's really lovely to see how much wider the scope is for literature when you get into that indie space, and hopefully the tide is shifting, but we'll see what happens.
Keep fighting.
Yep. Which actually brings us to one of the next questions, which I think is going to be a really fun, interesting conversation. Because of the systems that exist in this world right now, there's just a lot to be angry about. It's not great, and oftentimes you see the only kind of books that make it through are kind of stories about pain, about trauma. And those are really important to tell. And I'm going to bring this back at the end, but I want to know your thoughts on it about only dealing with these types of stories about pain and about trauma. Before we get there, your stories, being horror stories specifically, kind of only exist in that sphere because that's what horror is. And like all of the characters in Coyote Songs deal with the anger at that violence that's inflicted upon them by the systems of power. And it manifests in them committing their own pretty debatably justified acts of violence upon other people, specifically people who perpetuate those systems of violence upon them, which makes sense why you almost title it The Dissolution of Absolutes, which is just a chef's kiss title, immaculate.
It was killed, so glad you like it.
It's so good. It's such a good title. But I really imagine that being a person who exists within these systems, not on the necessarily the receiving end of all of these awful things all the time, being in this kind of middle place, but existing in that space all the time while you're writing must be really cathartic, but it also must be very emotionally taxing to exist there all the time. So how do you help yourself, and especially with your MFA students kind of writing this as well, how do you teach them how to leave those emotions kind of on the page and not bring them into your life all the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think every writer should start with 3 questions, and this is something that we talked a lot about in my violence workshops, but it applies to writing in general. Number 1, what am I getting out of this? All right, there are some students that simply want to entertain. They want to write a romance novel by the book, and they want a very happy ending. And that's awesome because we need to escape. All right.
Yeah.
There's a reason why romance books sell so well, just like fantasy. I don't read romance in my free time, but I have to read all of these romance narratives as part of my teaching. I know what folks do when they're turning to that genre. I know what they're looking for. So for me, is to center that writer and say, what are you trying to get out of this? All right. Once you find that purpose in your writing, moving to your second question, what do you think your readers are going to get out of this? And then you inhabit that interstitial space between what I want to say and writing is awesome. Writing is a miracle. Writing is the best thing that happened to me ever. And then there's publishing. Publishing is none of that. Publishing is a business. So are you writing for yourself? Stay with the first question and then just roll with it. You want to get published? You have to start contemplating another series of elements. For me, it was always, I can't tell happy ending stories because I've never experienced happy endings. People that I know have not experienced happy endings. Politics doesn't offer happy endings.
Nope.
There's no happy endings in immigration. There's small bursts of happy moments. That's life, and then shit gets rocky again. So I don't think we need to tell those stories. I think you ask yourself, what kind of story do I want to tell? And then we have, there's a lot of pain and suffering. Well, listen, I'm a woman. I'm a survivor of sexual violence. I need to exercise this thing and I need to put it on a page. Welcome. We welcome your pain. Let me read it. Let me feel it with you. Let me shed a tear. Let me tell the world about your great narrative. Somebody else wants to create an amazing world where the good guys always win and, somebody comes to the rescue at the end. I also like those stories. But then I sit down to write myself and I'm like, what do I have to write today to not go to jail tomorrow? And then that usually leads into some dark territory. And then a lot of people bleed and quote unquote bad things happen. But I'm doing this here and not in prison. So it's a good system. And every writer should start there. What do I want to do with this the writing thing? I want to make people laugh. I think humor is the best medicine in the world. You're goddamn right. Go write funny stories. Go make people laugh. I think when people get sexually excited, it takes them away from their problems in their life. I want to write erotica. Knock yourself out. You're going to make a bundle. That's your thing. Go for it. Yeah. That's not my case. I start thinking, what do I want to do with this? Is I want to scream. I want to punch people. I want to make things right. I want to offer individuals who are not on the right side of the digital divide or on the right side of skin color or sexuality or anything that's accepted. I want to write about the other. I want to tell all of the stories, which is impossible, but at least the ones that I can. Yeah. And then I go from there. And that's why, sadly, there are no happy endings in my work. But I love working with writers who have happy endings because there's a little bit of everything in life. So definitely. You're kind of in the spot where you're like, oh, I would be in this space anyway, so I just need to get it out. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think it was Cynthia Pelayo, who has a fantastic new novel called Children of Chicago, out now, came out last month. And she was saying, number one, this is what you get because I'm a Puerto Rican, second generation from the south side of Chicago. This is the stories that I need to tell because they're my stories. But this doesn't mean that I'm telling these stories because I'm a brown woman living in Chicago. Like, I don't think that should be your guiding light. If you're a Black lesbian, your stories don't have to be about how hard it is to be a Black lesbian in 2021. You don't have to do that. I'm not expecting you to do that. I'm saying you have the freedom to do that. And if that's what drives you to write, to tell your experience, I'll be here to celebrate it and share it with you. But you can be a fantastic comedian because you're a Black lesbian. You can write horror as a Black lesbian, or you can write about straight white male characters having wonderful adventures in a distant planet. So I don't give a Can we say bad words?
We can say it. It's fine.
I don't give a fuck about how your life. I mean, I do care about your life, but I don't give a fuck if you want to not share your personal life and you want to create something different. So not every LGBTQ writer that I know is writing about the LGBTQ experience. Some of them are just writing standard thrillers because that's what moves them, or man-woman relationship romance novels. And that's awesome. If that moves you, pursue that. Nobody's expecting you to do anything. And I think sometimes when we talk about publishing, there's this idea of, oh, you have one of them weird pronouns, so now you need to write about that experience and nothing else.
Yeah,
that's your space, that's your corner, stay over there. Nah, it's not how we should tackle publishing. So ask that question first. What am I getting out of this? What's going to make you happy? And then pursue those narratives.
Yeah, I think that's really accurate, actually. And you tied back into that first question initially really well about like only telling stories about trauma and pain. Because right now, like especially right now, there's that conversation on Twitter about own voices and forcing people to out themselves in the queer community and forcing people to kind of prove that they've gone through this kind of trauma, which is just some kind of weird exhibitionism that if you want to do that, you should be allowed to, but that shouldn't be what you're forced to do. And I think that's a really, really important thing to note. I kind of want to talk about, since we're in this space, like genre fiction and horror as kind of a social commentary. We have a whole separate panel on this, which I think everyone should go check out because it's going to be an awesome panel. But right here with our horror guest of honor, what do you feel that, because especially in your like kind of barrio noir area, you really kind of talk through that experience, and in Coyote Songs also with the Mosaic novel, that experience of showing the horrors of reality through this kind of fantastical lens that makes it both more real but more fake. What do you think that kind of allows you to do as opposed to if you were writing like in your nonfiction work? How does that kind of differentiate for you when you're writing horror?
So I think there's this beautiful thing that happens when we open the door and say, all right, we're writing horror, because that gives us the freedom to tell real stories and then embellish them a little bit and add something like that. And also I think I grew up believing that horror as a genre was about scaring people. And then I started reading stuff that wasn't horror that made me feel uncomfortable and unsettled. And I was like, I enjoy this much more than, witches and werewolves and zombies and scarecrows coming to life. So I kind of want to grab that from crime and from literary fiction and say, hey, I'm a horror writer. You know what scares me to death? Being homeless. You know what scares me to death? My mom getting cancer. Those things scare me. Werewolves, vampires, not really. And I think this beautiful thing happens when you read outside of horror, and then you realize that horror can come into any genre and then just knock down the door and say, like, I'm here. This means that I can put supernatural elements wherever the hell I want. I could turn this literary novel about a mom. I'll just kill her in the first page, and then she'll be a very angry ghost for the rest of the story. That makes it horror. The rest of the story doesn't need to play by any rules. It doesn't need to stay in its place. It doesn't have to follow any tropes. I can do whatever the hell I want. And that's the beauty of horror. That's the thing that we're seeing now more and more. Last year, Stephen Graham Jones' The Last Good Indians came out. If you think putting the word Indians in the title was not on purpose and a smack in the face of a lot of people, then you haven't been reading Stephen for long enough. It's a novel about the Native American experience. It's a novel about marrying a white woman. It's a novel about all those tropes. And then it has this really awful, bloody, gory, scary, creepy thing underneath it. I'm not going to give it away, but with some animals and a dog
absolutely
dies.
Read it.
And,
it's so good.
Absolutely read it. So is it a horror? By the way, it's now a New York Times best-selling novel. So shout out to Stephen. he takes horror and then he says, I'm going to do everything that I would like to do in any other novel, but this is what I like to do. This is what moves me. I like death and gore and all this stuff, and I think it'll improve my story if I tell it in this framework. And he runs with it, and it works so well. Yeah, so I think most of us are trying to do that. You know how they say every blues guitarist is knowingly or unknowingly trying to sound like B.B. King. We're all trying to achieve what Stephen did with that novel, which is like, I'm going to tell a very important story, but I'm going to scare the shit out of you. And if I can do that, if I can make you cringe, if I can turn your stomach, then whatever idea I wanted to drive home, instead of working its way into you, it'll just punch you in the face.
It'll be
and
there
stay
forever.
With you. Right. It'll be there forever. I'll tattoo it on your brain because you won't be able to forget about that one scene in the book. And horror is like that genre that says, come on, let's see what you got, and go wild with the violence and the scary stuff and the darkness.
And I really love the example that you kind of made before about a literary fiction novel that then becomes a horror novel. That kind of false dichotomy that exists between literary fiction and genre fiction, because Coyote Songs is as much of a literary fiction novel as anything I've ever read.
Thank you.
Like the elements and the themes and the motifs that you put in your work are just as good as anything I've read in a college program about reading all this fancy postmodern literature. And it's, I kind of want to know how your influences, because you read very, very widely, you kind of talk about that, how that idea of literary fiction versus genre, how you bat up against that all the time, I guess. Because I'm assuming as a horror writer, you kind of get taken a little less seriously than a literary fiction writer would. And how do you combat that for all of our aspiring horror writers in here?
Right. So I moved to the United States about 15, 16 years ago. I don't remember. So the whole literary versus genre thing was not something I was aware of until I moved here and started digging much deeper into publishing. My first reaction was, have these people not read Brian Evanson? Like, why are we having this? I understand having an initial conversation many decades ago when it started happening and being like, we need to protect the old ivory tower and the folks within by keeping these motherfuckers separated from us. That's not the case anymore. Some of the most literary work that I'm reading right now comes from quote unquote genre fiction. So it's the silly discourse that gets perpetuated for some very weird reason. Like, you teach at an MFA program, yes, and you've been nominated for this, and this, yes. Where did you get your MFA? I didn't get one. I didn't get one. That wasn't a thing that was on my radar. So I just became a writer, and I read a lot of books.
You did your own MFA.
I did my own MFA, and then I ended up with studying journalism. So it's still kind of bizarre to me when it comes up, because most of the amazing prose that I read that just stuns me, and I have to reread it and be like, I did not know you could do that with words. It often comes from crime and noir and thrillers and horror fiction and surreal fiction and experimental fiction, and then I'm supposed to have this conversation about how it doesn't have the same merits as literary fiction, which might end up being, in some cases, I'm not saying in every single case, don't get angry, but in some cases, like, this is the new best literary fiction novel. It's about a straight white guy getting an MFA in Brooklyn with daddy's money, finding his place in the world. I've already read that one. I didn't enjoy it.
Like a dozen times.
Right. I did not enjoy it. So tell you what, I'll read it if you give it a twist. Change that character. Put a ghost in his apartment. You got my attention. You can tell the same story. You can use all your fancy words and you can make juxtaposition, the first word in your manuscript to impress everyone with your spelling skills. And you can inject as much poetry as you want into your work, and then not not start having that conversation about this. This has a lot more merit because it's literary fiction, and Franzen gave me a blurb.
I really love that. The fact that it hasn't influenced that at all, and it coming into it just seems like a crazy idea, which is just such a beautiful thing. I wish everyone was just like, literature is literature. Enjoy it if it's good. So I guess we're coming up towards the end of this. One of the things I do want to talk about that we didn't really get to address, we kind of skipped over it because you're such an engaging person to talk to, and I just want to follow where your brain goes. But that kind of, we talked about the kind of that feeling of burnout before, and especially with the way that the world is, and how the theme of this is writing when the world's on fire, getting things done when the world's on fire. It just feels like you said, there are only those little moments of happiness, and then the shit hits the fan over and over and over again. How do you work with that feeling or combat a feeling of apathy or a feeling of everything is pointless? It doesn't matter what I do because I'm just one individual writing one story in the grand scheme of the world collapsing. How do you work with your students to kind of either push through that or recognize the value of the art that you're creating?
So when I moved here, I made a few friends in the horror community, and then I remember about a year into me living in Austin, suddenly walking around the house with my phone in my hand, and I was like, why am I holding my phone? Oh, because I'm on suicide watch. So if this individual calls me, I gotta talk them out of it. So I don't really like talking on the phone, but this is a very important phone call. It's one phone call that a lot of people will never know about, and it might never happen. And if it does, it will mean the world to one person. So the world is on fire, yet here we are celebrating literature. The world is on fire. Last week, editor Mark Matthews said, hey, remember, he was joking, he said, remember, now you have to say multiple Bram Stoker Award nominee. And I was like, oh, you got a goddamn point. It doesn't happen every day. You don't sell your novel in France every day, but when it happens, it helps you realize that wouldn't have happened without every single day of work that went into that book. So you cannot control award nominations. You cannot control that Netflix contract. You cannot control what your agent manages to do or not do with your novel. Only thing you can do is you wake up in the morning, you decide this is what I want to do with my life. This is what I'm good at. This is what I want to share with people. And then you go at it, you go at it hard. That day you might succeed or you might fail. And then you move on. You go to bed, you wake up and you try again. Most of the success, when we see these successful writers, Sean Cosby comes to mind. I don't think there's a crime award that Blacktop Wasteland has not been nominated for this year. And they're like, oh, this overnight success. Hell no overnight success. He's been doing it for ages. The world is just noticing now. If he hadn't put in all that work, it wouldn't have happened. Go to Amazon. Look up Stephen Graham Jones on Amazon. He's now a New York Times best-selling writer. He's been at it forever and a day, banging out novel and novella and short story collection, one after the other, just putting in that work. If you don't do, that's the only thing you control. If you don't do that every single day, those shiny, bright, awesome moments that go on your biography when you send it to people, they won't happen. All right, you'll just sit there feeling unhappy and wondering, what am I going to do with my life that has any merit? You said you enjoyed Coyote songs. That's a victory. You found it somewhere online, you heard about it, you bought it, you read it, and then you even wanted to talk to me about it. It's a huge victory. So now I have enough, with this interview, I have enough to push me for like 48 hours of hustle, finish those edits, turn in another review, keep working on the thing. In 2 days, I might feel burned out. I'll go find something else. I'll I'll go read an email. I don't know. An anthology invitation. Somebody actually invites you to contribute a story. There you have it. Somebody thinks you're good enough to ask you for a story. Another 2, 3, 4, 5 days of put in the work. If you don't put in the work every single day, none of those tiny little bright moments will happen. And so you get up and do the thing time and time again. And the world burns and folks don't have vaccines. And Greg Abbott just said, fuck it, no masks. While there's every variant of COVID in Houston. I can't control him. I can't control people not being racist or homophobes. Can't control it, but I can kick their asses in my books. So it's something to use. It's something to fuel the fire, and keep doing the thing day in and day out. And then one day you celebrate. You have one victory. You did it. Start thinking about the next one. Every boxer knows you're only as good as your last fight. So if you don't fight in a very long time, people forget about you. So maybe you're a slow writer like me. It took me like 2 years to finish a book, but don't worry, you can put short stories out in between. So don't worry about doing the.
You can put a ridiculous amount of short stories out in between. Well, this was truly an honor, man. Like
all mine.
This was fantastic. Everyone buy Coyote Songs. Pre-order as soon as you can this next book once he gets it out. Petition Netflix to make Coyote Songs into a limited series.
All right, yeah. No, if that happens, I'll just have to take all of you out for tacos, and that's gonna be expensive. So I hope Netflix pays well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the convention.
Thank you.